Probably a more common reason to adjust the node object is to add custom data to it that we've stored in some storage mechanism. So in our next example, what we're going to do is add to the node form to add a new setting to it that allows us to set a backup user. And the idea of a backup user will be that in further examples, we'll allow the user that's specified in that input to edit the node, even though they're not the owner of it and maybe they don't have the correct permissions to adjust nodes. So the idea is that if the original author falls off the face of the earth, that there's an alternate that can go and edit that content. But our first step is storing that data somehow. So we're going to adjust the node form to add a field for that user specification. And next we're going to adjust the output of the node, and specifically the node load part where we're building that node object to begin with. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back to our module directory, and we're going to open up step 4, which is called modifying node form and saving custom data. Go ahead and copy the code there and paste it over the code that's currently in your .module file. We've added a good bit of code here. Let's scroll up to the top so we can see. It's right below our stuff examples page function here in stuff form alter. So we talk about form alter in the forms videos, but let me just give a quick rehash of what it's for. Through form alter, we can adjust any form in Drupal. And what we want to do is adjust any node form to add our new field that allows the user to select a username. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to check to see if the form node edit form property exists. If so, then we're working with a node edit form. And our next step is to add our new input for the user. So we're calling it stuff backup user. We're just prefixing it with the name of our module to keep the namespacing clean. We're giving it a type of text field, a title of backup user, and we're setting the default value. In further steps, as we go through this example, we'll look at how to save the data to the node object directly, and then at that point, when the node is loaded, it will contain our information about the backup user. And we can access the node data inside of our node form by using the form node object. Notice the hashtag. And in this will contain all of our node information like title and body, last updated, that kind of information. And so we can access our new property, stuff backup user, the same way. We're checking to see if it exists, and if so, we want to set the default value to that value. And if not, we're just going to set the default to blank. We're going to make this input a little easier to fill out by adding an autocomplete path, and by setting it to user/autocomplete, the user, when they start typing in a username, will see a select box of options that they can choose from in order to automatically fill in the input. We're setting a size to 12 and a max length to 60, and then a description about what this field is all about. If we save this, we should now see a new input in our node edit form. So I'm going to jump back to the browser, and we want to clear our caches just to make sure we get everything registered properly. Now we can go ahead and edit our node. And down here at the bottom, we see our new input, backup user. And we see the little circle that indicates that this is an autocomplete input. So if I wanted to start filling in admin, I could do that, and it will pre-fill it for me. Okay, let's jump back to the code. So now we have our input, but nothing will happen when the node is actually saved or an existing node is updated. So we need to account for these two scenarios. The first is when a node is created the first time, and the second is when an existing node is updated. And we'll do that using two hook functions. The first one, let's scroll down, is called hook node insert. So we've defined a function called stuff node insert here. and it takes a single parameter, which is the node object. What we're going to do in this is save our user information to a custom table that we've defined in our install file. Now we go through the details of creating a schema inside of the install file when we talk about the database abstraction layer in other videos, but let's go ahead and jump to our install file and take a look at the structure of our table where we're going to save this data. Jump back to the module folder and go ahead and open up stuff.install. This is a pretty simple file. We have just a single function to define a schema, and a schema is a structure for a database table. And we're establishing a single table called stuff backup. We're giving it a description and two fields. The first is the NID, or the node ID of the node which we're adjusting, and the second is the username, and this is the username of the backup user. Now again, if you're curious how this schema came to be, you can take a look at the schema module, which allows you to construct a table inside of your database editor and then generate a schema automatically simply by loading a certain page on the module. But when we installed the stuff module, this schema function ran and added this table to our database. So we'll have this to work with inside of our code. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back to the stuff.module file. Our first step is to make sure that we've set some backup user inside of our code. So we're looking for the node stuff backup user property. Now this node object here is the result of the submission form. So it will include any additional fields that we added to it. Our next step is to insert into the stuff backup table the fields of the node ID and the username that was selected. So if you're curious about this structure here, it looks a little funky if you haven't seen it before. Go ahead and take a look at the database abstraction layer or database API videos, and that will detail what this is. This is called a dynamic query, and it allows us to build a query step by step and allow other modules to adjust it later, or we can adjust it if we need to by adding conditionals to it. Okay, but it's pretty straightforward. We're grabbing the node ID from the node object, and then we're grabbing the username from the node stuff backup user field. And then we're running execute in order to process this query. When this runs, we'll just set a simple message to tell the user that they've set this specific username as the backup user for the node. Okay, our next step is to take care of what happens when a user updates a node that exists already. So if you scroll down, you'll see that we're defining a second function here, which is an implementation of hook node update. Just like with hook node insert, this takes a single parameter, which is node, and this is the node object that's been constructed from the form that was submitted. And we're going to check to make sure that we don't already have an entry inside of our stuff backup table for this node. So we're checking here using a static query to select the node ID from stuff backup, where the node ID equals, and then we're using a placeholder here. And then we're replacing this placeholder with the node ID. So we're checking to see if we have an entry that has the same node ID as the node that we're currently saving. We're just grabbing a single field using fetch field to make sure that this entry exists. And if it does, then we're going to want to update our entry in the database table instead of create a new one. So we're going to run a function called dbUpdate. Again, this is part of the database API. We're running it on the stuff backup table. And then we're just passing it the fields NID and username. So you'll see that this structure is identical to our insert statement that we used above with dbInsert. The difference with this one is that we're adding a condition to check the node ID for the NID of the node that we're currently acting on before we execute the query. Okay, in this process, we'll update with any new information that we've added into our backup user field. And then we're going to set a message that says you've updated the node to use this particular username as your backup user. If that's not the case, then we want to just run an insert just like we would when a node is created. So this would happen if we had a series of nodes already and then we installed our module. There wouldn't be any entries in our database for those nodes, so every time a node was updated for the first time, it would need to insert a new entry into the database. So we're just going to run stuff node insert, just run that hook, just like it would process when a node is inserted. And we're going to pass it the node object. The one other action we should take into account when working with a node is when the node is deleted. So we've added one more function here to remove the entry from our stuff backup database whenever a node is deleted that corresponds to that entry. We do so using the function hook node delete. So this is an implementation of hook node delete. So we're calling it stuff node delete. We're passing it the node object just like we did with hook node insert and hook node update. And we're running a query function called dbDelete, and this is structured very similarly to our previous dynamic queries. We're selecting the table stuff backup. We're adding a condition of NID equals node ID, and then we're executing this. And this will just delete this entry that corresponds to the node ID being the node that's currently being deleted. Okay, go ahead and make sure that your module is saved, and then jump back to the browser. And what we're going to do is clear our caches just to make sure that everything's registered properly. And let's go ahead and edit this node. I'm going to just hover over the node and select this cogwheel and click edit. And we're going to save a backup user of admin. And we're going to save it. And if we look at the top here, we'll see the message that we set to display when the node got edited here. You have updated the node to use admin as the backup user for this node. Excellent. And if we looked at the stuff backup table in our database, we would see a new entry in there for our node ID 50 that includes the username admin. Now, if we go to edit this form now, and we scroll down to our backup user, we'll see that it's still blank. And this is because we need to implement another hook in order to load our data into the node object when it gets used. And that is used in the node edit form as well as any place where the node is displayed.